What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. Hope you're happy, safe, healthy. Want to wish you a very happy third day. It is Thursday, the third day, May the 8th, 2025. And that means that we have a lot to get to. In case you don't know, in case you're new around here, I do these live shows every single Tuesday and Thursday exclusively in the Bleacher Report apps. You can download the Bleacher Report app. You should have it anyway. It's the very best app in the world of sports. You get news, alerts, every single thing about all your favorite teams. If you follow me right down below in the BR app, you can see all of my favorite teams as well. It's the best. And I'm live every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can also catch these shows on demand in the same place, the BR app, or as well on the Blog of the Boys YouTube channel. If you're over on YouTube, hey, hello, love you. Make sure you like the video, subscribe. If you want to hang out with me on social media, you can see the ways to do so. I also have a Facebook page. You can go like that, search for RJ Ochoa. Search for RJ Ochoa on Blue Sky if that is more your thing. If you want to send me an email, if that's your thing, if you think you're Elle Woods and this is one of those big colorful MacBooks in Legally Blonde, like the pink and orange ones when they were first debuting those things, rj.ochoa.sbnation.com is how you can get me there. All right, my voice is a little sore, more sore than it has been in weeks prior because it's been a very busy week. In fact, since the last time you and I spoke in one of these specifically in the Bleacher Report app, I know our YouTube audience has gotten some of my thoughts already relative to the trade. The Dallas Cowboys did, in fact, execute a trade for a new wide receiver, George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers. The main primary piece of meat, value, compensation involved is a third-round pick in next year's draft, 2026. If you had asked me, like, even right now, when 2026 was, I would have said, dude, that's like in 8 years. You know, I would not have been able to have processed that it's next year. But there was a pick swap as well in 2027, Dallas and Pittsburgh swapping 5th and 6th-round picks. That really doesn't matter. It is technically a part of things, but kind of like the Amari Cooper trade, nobody remembers that there was a day 3 pick swap involved as well. It was just the 5th-round pick. It's always been the 5th-round pick that everybody remembers relative to that trade, and I'm sure the 3rd-round pick will be the kind of thing that sticks. Now, full disclosure, hand up, I would not have done this. I've said this, and I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to shoot you straight. I'm doing, you know, there are pros. Don't get me wrong, and I outlined them already to our Blog on the Boys audience, not just on YouTube, but all over the place. Anywhere that I created any kind of content, I believe that there are cons. I think if you are denying that there are cons, I'm not going to call you any kind of names, but I think you're being a little bit of a homer. I think if you're saying this is nothing but an upside thing, then I don't think that you're being fully fair. Now, you might feel like the potential cons, the potential, you know, ramifications, consequences don't matter. They're trivial, they're small, they're minute, they're, you know, moot, to go back to a quote from Joseph Tribbiani. Then fine. I mean, we can have that debate, but I think the cons exist. Now, that being said, the pros also exist. And the pros are that the Cowboys are getting an extraordinarily talented football player, somebody who could really help their offense. We're going to talk about right now just how talented he is and just how much he can help their offense. And look, even if you can't get around to it, even if you, like me, were against the trade for this specific player, and I have no ill will towards George Pickens specifically, I just would not have rolled these dice. But what I will say is I kind of like that the team is rolling some dice, even if it's something I wouldn't have done, right? I like that they're being bold and daring and cunning, and to be quite frank, that they're being aggressive. And I hate these cookie cutter, cheesy, you know, like, you know, something you would find in a gas station slogans that the Cowboys keep having for their off seasons with all in and selectively aggressive. But damn it, I got to give Stephen Jones some props because he said they were going to be selectively aggressive this offseason, and they have done that. They have executed 4 veteran trades. They executed 1 trade during the NFL draft. They were conservative and chill in a smart, practical way during the draft and letting talent fall to them like Tyler Booker, like Donovan Ezuraku, like Savon Ravel. Obviously, the top of the draft is the most representative of this philosophy. And so, respect. I mean, like, seriously, I'm going to be, I don't want to give us a spoiler from Wednesday's episode of Survivor, but I'm going to be like what happened at the end. If you know, you know, and just stand up, you know what I mean? And just kind of stand up randomly. So that's a niche reference, and I appreciate and love those of you who get it. So the ultimate thing here is, even if this is something I wouldn't have done, I will absolutely live on this end of the spectrum. Let's have fun. Let's party. Let's be weird. Let's be crazy. Let's do fun, aggressive, interesting things. And if we're going to lose, okay, cool. But at least we're having fun in the process, right? Like, I kind of like, if you're going to go down in flames. And this isn't even going down in flames, but this is having fun. This is, you know, cool and interesting. And so George Pickens, newest member of the Dallas Cowboys, spoke to the local media on Thursday and said, I think, really I used the phrase cookie cutter a minute ago, some kind of cookie cutter, straight down the line, right kind of things. And respect, that's what you want, right? Like, especially if you're someone like me who is concerned or has been concerned about the locker room fallout, if you want to call it, it's not the right word, but just potential reality, potential results. It is nice to see him saying the right things. Now, again, I'm not trying to say that George Pickens needs to be policed or babysat. That's not my point. But it is cool to see that he's saying, look, I just want to come in. I want to help build this culture. And you may think that that's just fluff. You may think that these are just words. You may think that this is just whatever. But he is saying the right thing. It's kind of like we've been saying about Brian Schottenheimer for I don't know why I said Brian Schottenheimer like that. But it's kind of like we've been saying about Brian Schottenheimer for, what is it now, 3-ish months, 3 months and change, right? Like he is passing all of the tests. These are not football games. These are not Sunday afternoons against the Eagles or the Packers or the 49ers, but they are checking the boxes. They are, passing go and collecting their $200 every time. And so to that point, I mean, I'm quite pleased. And I will say, right before we dive into some of this information and stuff that we're ready to kind of look at here, and I mentioned this already on Wednesday, but it bears repeating. I believe that you are probably like me. I'm grateful that you consumed my content, whoever you are, over the last year. But man, I would bet that it was not fun, because last year was not fun. Last year was, in the time I've been doing this professionally now for about 10 years. And in the time that I've even been a fan of the team, I've been a fan my entire life, obviously. But, from the time whether I was 8 years old or a year ago, whatever, you get my point. Last year was the least amount of fun I have ever had. Ever, ever, ever. And that's why, we talked after the Thanksgiving win, or the different moments. We're like, dude, let's just enjoy this. Like, this is cool. Like, they're playing well around the holidays type stuff. And so that being said, I will in no way sign up to go back to that. So, we're a year removed from them pushing the agenda of Zeke Elliott down our throats and saying, like, this is a real thing. Trust us. It's going to work. And we were like, no, this isn't gonna, like, we're not stupid. But this could work, right? This really could work. This George Pickens thing, this actually could work. And that's what's exciting. So I tweeted these things, a few of these things out on Thursday. We're going to take a look at them here. Shout out to my friends at StatHead, Pro Football Reference. Any kind of research I do is done through them. If you follow on YouTube, you know that. But I wanted to see how George Pickens fared relative to some different examples in NFL history. Now, we talk a lot about how Pickens is a great deep ball threat and how Dak Prescott hasn't had that weapon in the offense since, call it 2019 Michael Gallup. I mean, it's really kind of been a card that he hasn't been able to play. And Dak Prescott is one of the better deep ball throwers in the entire NFL, despite whatever your friends on Facebook tell you. So what you're looking at here is a list. I accidentally said 16 players. That's because these were players who averaged over 16 or more yards per reception. So that number was stuck in my brain. But this is a list of 28 players, not just receivers, but pass catchers. You can see Mike Ditka. That's Dallas Cowboys tight end Mike Ditka at the bottom of this list. But all 28 players in NFL history who averaged over 16 yards per reception with a minimum of 150 receptions over the first 3 years of their career. So we're talking about a very small sample size, not small sample size, but very, very small amount of receptions, but 150 still. I mean, look at the amount of receptions. George Pickens is on this list if this isn't obvious, but he has 174. You look at somebody like Torrey Holt had 215. Randy Moss had 226. Like, there are a lot of players who had more than him. You have to go down to Kenny Golladay in a different era of the Lions to find somebody who had fewer than him and still met this measurement. But George Pickens has been wildly productive for not having stable quarterback play. That's obviously been one of the bigger things that we've been discussing here. And so, yeah, he can truly, totally, absolutely help the Cowboys from a deep down the field perspective. And I think that is something that is seriously going to unlock different elements of this team. Now, this list is just the last 25 years, not all of NFL history. And this is a list of only 18 people. You can see George Pickens is on here. This is the number of people who had, because it's one thing to average so many yards per reception. But, when I was looking at this, I kept seeing, George Pickens, 20-yard catch, 20-yard catch, 20-yard catch. He has 13 receptions of at least 20 yards or more, obviously, throughout his first 3 seasons in the NFL. So this is a list of people who had at least 13 receptions of 20 or more yards in their first 3 seasons in the NFL. You could see Pickens, meets this threshold because he has exactly 13. But we're talking about, I mean, you've got some, some deep ball specialists here like Alec Pierce, but then you've got some ballers, right? Like, I mean, Torrey Smith was kind of a deep ball dude, Deshaun Jackson early on. But Greg Jennings is here, Calvin Johnson, Kenny Stills, like player AJ Brown. I mean, these are players who were really, really, really productive. And the funny thing about AJ Brown, I think that this trade is similar to that. And this is something that I've sort of realized over the last, whatever it's been now, not 30 hours, maybe it's been like 32, 35 hours at the time I'm doing this. But this is very similar to AJ Brown. Not that he's a similar player necessarily, but AJ Brown it was just kind of not working in Tennessee, kind of viewed as, not the most harmonious person, within the Titans locker room, had a bit of a headbutting with Mike Vrabel at the time. And Philadelphia said, oh, we'll take him and we'll be awesome. And what has happened ever since they acquired him, he and they have been awesome. They just won the Super Bowl, obviously. But I think that that's a good comp. Now, where I will say the Eagles did this right, what a shocker, is the Eagles traded for AJ Brown, if you recall, the night that the 2022 NFL draft began, actually the day before George Pickens was drafted by then the Steelers. And the Eagles immediately gave him a contract extension. And my perspective here, because everything that we're talking about and we're going to continue to talk about for the next 20 minutes is about how much better of a football team the Cowboys are with George Pickens now on their roster, whether you liked the fact that they acquired him or not. That being said, they are a better football team. We've said this many different times already. And my point is, I may not have done this, but we're here now. And now we have to, talk about this situation. And since we're here now, get an extension done. I know that George Pickens said he's not focused on this. I know that the Cowboys have said they're not focused on this. Dude, don't be this way, please. We're saying please. We're asking you very kindly. Don't do this where you just drag your feet again, because you're already in a situation, and this is now no longer about George Pickens, but where you've got Micah Parsons, who you're negotiating with at the moment, who is currently at this moment set to enter the final year of his contract, his rookie deal. Micah, by the way, represented by David Mulugeta, whether Jerry Jones knows his name or not, the same man who represents George Pickens. You're currently on some level theoretically negotiating with Deron Bland, who's currently set to enter the final year of his contract. You should be negotiating with Tyler Smith, who, even though he isn't set to enter the final year of his deal, is entering the final or the penultimate year of his deal and is eligible for an extension. That's the most important thing. You don't need to play this way. If you're trading a third-round pick and some change, admittedly, but a third-round pick primarily for this player, and your reasoning, your rationale behind doing that is that he's going to make you awesome. He's going to improve your quarterback. He's going to help CeeDee Lamb. He's going to help, everybody else around you. And if you believe that, then pay him. Like, if you believe that, like all this, like, oh, well, he should have to prove it, or, they want to see or whatever. Why? This is betting against yourself. Plan on him being very good. That should be how you go about this. That should be how you go about any kind of extension. We talk about this all the time, but I didn't mean to get on a soapbox, a tangential one at that. Let's keep looking at some George Pickens statistics. So this is a longer list. This is a list. This is half of a list, really, of 60 players, pass catchers to be specific, in NFL history, who all reached the threshold that George Pickens has through the first 3 years in his NFL career. Pickens has met 170 receptions, 2,800 receiving yards, and he has exactly 12 touchdowns, again, through the first 3 seasons of his career specifically. These are all players who did that, all players who had at least 170 receptions, at least 2,800 receiving yards, and at least 12 receiving touchdowns. Drake London has done it. Obviously, Drake London, same draft class as George Pickens, and so is Garrett Wilson. But they're the only 3. I mean, they're the most recent 3. Obviously, they've only just completed their 3rd season. But you're talking about players on this list include Jalen Waddle. I mean, like, let me go down the list. This is the type of player who the Cowboys just acquired, which is why there is a legitimate reason to be excited, even if you didn't want this to happen in the first place. And you might be saying, well, now that you say this, it's ridiculous to not have wanted it. Fine, whatever. That being said, these are the players: Drake London, George Pickens, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. I'm at number 10. Tell me when you don't hear it, dude. CeeDee Lamb, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin, Calvin Ridley, Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, maybe that's your cutoff point. George Kittle, Michael Thomas, who has fallen off, but was a dude early on in his career. Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Mike Evans, Allen Robinson, Brandon Cooks, DeAndre Hopkins, T.Y. Hilton, the GOAT on 3rd and 30. Alshon Jeffrey, AJ Green, Des Bryant, Mike Wallace, Hakeem Nicks. Now we're kind of stretching it a little bit, although Hakeem Nicks was awesome for a little point in time. Deshaun Jackson, Calvin Johnson. I mean, holy crap! These are the last 33 players to do it, and these are all some badass dudes, some like dudes with a capital D for the most part. We're talking about, Drake London, wide receiver 1, Garrett Wilson's a 1, Waddle's kind of a debate, Jamar Chase obviously, Devontae kind of a debate, Amon-Ra a 1, T Higgins, that's the debate. Justin, CeeDee, DK, these are all number 1 alpha dudes who are contributing at a high level. And, Drake London hasn't necessarily had stable quarterback play for his career so far. Neither has Garrett Wilson, and neither has Jalen Waddle. But Jamar Chase has, Devontae Smith has, Amon-Ra St. Brown has for the most part, T. Higgins has, Justin Jefferson kind of did, CeeDee Lamb has, although you could certainly count the injuries. My point is, like, if you're talking about the tools that they've had to work with relative to the quarterbacks throwing them the ball, George Pickens is maybe the most impressive in that regard. So that's pretty exciting. And now, again, these thresholds here are 170 receptions, 2,800 yards, and exactly 12 touchdowns or more in the first 3 seasons of a player's career. Only 2 players in Dallas Cowboys franchise history have done this within their first 3 years. You obviously saw them. They're CeeDee Lamb and Dez Bryant. So that's the kind of cut here you're getting in George Pickens. Like, you're literally getting that level of production. And even then, Dez's first 3 years, that 2012 season was fantastic, but that was just the beginning. If you recall, that the real 3-year wonder for Dez was 2012 through 2014. So 2012 was just opening the door. And same with CeeDee. Similarly, we're talking about the first 3 seasons of a player's career here. 2020 obviously had the Dak injury for CeeDee, but 2021, Amari was still the alpha in town. It wasn't until 2022, until CeeDee kind of began to bust out of the cocoon himself to be the butterfly, on campus, so to speak. And so that my point here is, like, there used to be this trope, there used to be this conversation about how NFL wide receivers made their jump in their 3rd year, and that is somewhat evidenced in this data. But holy crap, when they make their jump in their 3rd year, then they, like, based on kind of our memory here, from year 4 and beyond, they are some serious dudes, which is, kind of a sign of hope that that's who George Pickens is. And you're giving him better quarterback play at this point in time. And again, I would use A.J. Brown as kind of an example in that regard. Really was kind of in this haphazard offense with Ryan Tannehill, and obviously Derrick Henry was running the ball. That was who the Titans were. But whatever you think of Jalen Hurts, and it's fair to think a lot of things, obviously, I mean, it was a much more stable offensive operation. So you put, George Pickens in a more stable offensive operation. And I'm not saying it's fair to expect what A.J. Brown has been for the Eagles, but I do think it's fair to expect a jump. I do think it's fair to expect and believe that maybe we're looking at a player who is only starting to scratch the surface in terms of what he can do. And a lot of that has to do, again, with the quarterback play. And when I tweeted this out, somebody responded, shout out to the Condimon, was the person on X who noticed this in the last graphic that you saw, and you can rewind whatever platform you're watching if you're watching this after the fact. The Condimon noticed that, Pickens had significantly fewer targets than everybody else. And I hadn't really seen that when I, did my first data search. And so I looked at it, and in this time period, George Pickens, his first 3 seasons in the NFL, he's only had 293 targets. So to have that much production off of only 293 targets was kind of stood out to me, and obviously stood out to the Condimon. And so after I had looked this up, I decided to add that extra filter. So I wanted to look at players who had reached these thresholds: 170 receptions, 2,800 receiving yards, 12 receiving touchdowns in their first 3 seasons specifically, and any player who did this with 300 or fewer targets, because Pickens has done it with 293. In the long history of the NFL, there are only 3 players who have done this. Only 3. I don't know if you could see this that well. This is a much better look at this, I guess. Only 3. Like, you're talking about 3, and the 3 here are George Pickens, obviously A.J. Brown. Again, that's why the comp keeps making sense to me, and Mike Wallace, who ironically enough was a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. Pretty wild to kind of think about. But I'm not suggesting that we're going to see an A.J. Brown bump for George Pickens in year 4. But what I am saying is only these 3 players made this much lemonade with the type of lemons that they were given. And I know that Mike Wallace wasn't that great in Miami and beyond after he left Pittsburgh, but man, I mean, it is fair to let your imagination run wild with yourself relative to Pickens. And I think he can help in that way. You're adding a serious offensive weapon. Jay Cabrera, 2355. Let's put your comment up on the screen. Jay Cabrera says, I think I fall in the camp of hoping the potential is greater than the risk. Also, whether this works or not, just glad they realize they have to be active to keep up. I'm excited for this. And this is ultimately after I let go of the fact that I wouldn't have done it. This is exactly where I land. like I said, I wouldn't have done it. I don't want to be a waffler, so I'm remaining with conviction in that. I'm never going to tell you, oh, you know what, it was a brilliant thing, I would have done it, blah blah. If it works out, I'll be very happy. I'll just as happy as anybody else. But that's what I said. And so that being said, that's exactly what I want here. I'm still skeptical because it's been a day, like just to be bluntly honest here. But if the Cowboys can hold all this together, however you want to put it, there is some serious potential. I mean, as evidence, think about the things we just said. Think about the data we just looked through. We're talking about an incredibly special player and an incredibly special talent. And so you can certainly make the argument that even if you feel the risk is big, that it's worth that, right? I agree with the point from Jay Cabrera that the Cowboys have realized finally, thank God, on some level, you know what? Sometimes we got to risk it. Sometimes we got to be bold. And maybe that was where I erred the most is I've just been conditioned by them to, play it safe, to lay up on these par fives. Well, you know what? Damn it. Let's go for the green. I like this. I like that they pulled the wood out and they said, let's go for it. I don't care if there's water. I don't care if there's sand. I don't care what's going on. We're putting this on in two. I love that. And I really respect and appreciate the approach in that particular way. And I hope it works out. That goes without saying. So there's zero doubt, zero question. There's data, there's evidence, there's film, there's nothing but information and reality to support the notion that the Cowboys just got significantly better from a football standpoint. And if you're not agreeing with that, then I don't think you're being fair to any kind of reality. So let's take a look at their offense as it currently stands. Shout out to my friends at Our Lads. Let's zoom in right here. We've been looking at this for the last few shows that we've been doing because we've been focusing on this spot right here, Mr. George Pickens. We've been saying, look, I maintain and I stand by the fact that bringing Amari back would have been awesome and it would have been cool. And is he the player that George Pickens is? No, clearly not. That's not my point. But what would have been cool about Amari that would have been unique to him is he would have represented, hey, we were wrong. We messed up. This was a bad trade on our part. We're trying to make it right now at this point. That would have been nice. Now, I will say the George Pickens things represents something else, represents a cunning disposition like we talked about a moment ago. But, I feel so good about this offense playing a football game. Like this offense on paper, I'm not going to tell you that I think it's the best offense in the NFL, but it is a top tier offense. I haven't, given enough thought to where I would rank it, but you are talking about, if not to go down, top to bottom the way it looks here, but from a quarterback standpoint, I know that people say what they want and I know people, whatever. I've lost the will to try to save the people who don't understand Dak Prescott, but he is a franchise quarterback, a top 10 dude, flirts with top 7, top 5 days, obviously. And you just helped him significantly. So if you're mature enough, capable enough of admitting that he is very good, he just got better by way of the George Pickens trade. So you should be excited about that. And from a wide receiver standpoint, you've got one of the 3 best receivers in the NFL in CeeDee Lamb. And now you have one of the, 25 best receivers in the NFL in George Pickens, if we're being kind of generous. I mean, you have a star-studded wide receiver duo. And to Jay Cabrera's other point here, said such a big difference when Tolbert, Mingo, Turpin are fighting to be the number 3 rather than 2. I completely agree with you. I agree with you so much. I'm putting your comment over my face. And that's the thing. Like when you look at this now, it was like abrasive. It was like a visual attack to see Jalen Tolbert's name at wide receiver 2, to see Jonathan Mingo so close to the top. No, like this can work. like this can actually work now. And this is, I don't know. This is, purely a guess, not even a guess. It's reckless to guess, but it stands to reason that players like Tolbert and Mingo were maybe bothered or upset or, bummed, whatever you want to call it, by the trade, right? Because the trade signifies we don't think you're enough to handle this job. We're going to invest something serious and this guy to come do it. That would be a tough pill to swallow, right? If we were wide receivers on the Cowboys that weren't now CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens, we would be bummed, right? Because we wanted that job. Now you might say, well, Tolbert has had his chance and he has proven that he can't be that guy. That's fair. Jonathan Mingo hasn't really had a fair shake at the chance, but I think we all understand that it's wise not to make that bet. And so that being said, yeah, like all of a sudden, forget the draft pick that was spent to acquire him. That's water under the bridge. It's silly. It's whatever. But now Jonathan Mingo is your 4th receiver, as opposed to, like, for the last 2 weeks, we've been somewhat coping ourselves right? I mean, if you watched the show I did, and by the way, I should apologize to the YouTube audience. We had a technical difficulty on Tuesday. So only the Bleacher Report audience saw that show. That's my apologies. Thankfully, the Pickens trade happened on Wednesday, so you were able. This has been a busy week. We got a lot of interviews and things dropping, so you're fine. But that is a serious apology from me. That being said, one of the things I talked about on Tuesday was what ifs, like these, ponderous what ifs for the Cowboys this coming season. And one of the what ifs I talked about was, what if Jonathan Mingo is good? We don't have to wonder anymore. Like we don't have to build, this building on top of a what if wobbly, block anymore, right? Now you've got some foundation there. Now you've got something stable and legitimate, something that can withstand the pressure of what you're placing on top of it. And Jonathan Mingo, you're now like, the reality is, or the potential reality is, that he can realize the potential or the expectation of being your wide receiver 4 much more easily than he can realize the expectation of being your wide receiver 2. So the George Pickens thing, again, if you were like me and you weren't, this wasn't your exact preference, what's awesome about it, beyond who he is as a football player, we talk about how obvious it is that he made Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb better. He made Jalen Tolbert better. He makes Jonathan Mingo better. He makes Kevontae Turpin's limited snaps on offense better. Now, what I will say is this is kind of a bummer, because we, for certain people on the roster, maybe you thought Treshaun Holden was going to make this team as a UDFA. I think that was a popular pick. Just because he's a UDFA, he's a free agent, or a college free agent, whatever. I mean, like, that happens. But I mean, the Cowboys wide receiver room is now kind of full, which is just silly to say that. But you've got CeeDee, you've got Pickens, you've got Tolbert, you've got Mingo. Those 4 are locks. You've got Turpin, if you want to count him as a wide receiver, which you probably should. You've got 5. I mean, so now you've got to decide a 6th between Ryan Flournoy and Jalen Brooks. Flournoy probably beats him out because he's got more years of team control remaining. So we're at 6. I mean, maybe if you carry a 7th because you don't really count Turpin as one, if you feel that way, maybe it's Jalen Brooks. My point is, it's an uphill battle now for the players down the roster. And, that stinks for them. Jay Cabrera adds, but what if he is talking about Mingo being good? LOL. Sounds crazy, but it would be amazing. And ultimately, the point here, and this is why the Pickens trade makes the Cowboys such a better team, is the route, the path to someone like Jonathan Mingo, who we have extraordinarily low expectations for, and none of that is his fault. But the path or route or likelihood of him being good, right? Like the what if, the ponderous what if I talked about a moment ago, that, like, it's more within reach now, right? Like before, let me grab my phone here. Like before, it was like way out of here. Like there was no way that he could, that what if felt so far away. Now it's like right here. Like now you can kind of grab it, because all you need is for Jonathan Mingo to just be wide receiver 4. Like just be that guy. Like, you know what I mean? Just come in for your, like, your 2 targets a game maybe, and make the most of them. Like, that's cool, And what I will say is we, give the Cowboys their props and their credit and their due. What is cool, what would have been dangerous, and I called this Pickens trade reckless, and I believe it is on some level, but as noted, you kind of have to be reckless at a certain point. But what I think would have been more reckless would have been if the Cowboys had said to themselves, and then, effectively to all of us, well, hey, look, we drafted Mingo, so like we've invested there. We're stuck. Like we're just going to go at it because, that would have been a sunk cost fallacy. And I would not have been a proponent for that, to be very clear. But my overall point here is that, man, like this roster just got like a significant boost in a lot of ways. And the expectation, the floor for so many things and so many people and so many rooms in the team, is amplified simply by the presence of him. So in that respect, when you talk it out loud like this, maybe you're sitting there saying, RJ, why were you, whoa, I hit a button on my keyboard. Maybe you're sitting there saying like, RJ, why were you against it? I mean, probably because I'm scared that it's going to fall apart and it's not going to work. That's really what it ultimately comes down to. And I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that on a mid-October day, we can all sit here. We could be like, remember how silly it was that RJ thought this was a bad idea? I really hope that. I really do. I will be the first to smoke the crow in my pit boss, not an ad. Just, that's the machine that I own, and eat it. You know what I mean? I'll be the first one to do that. I'm sure Meat Church has a recipe for that. And my guy, Matt Pittman, has recipes for everything else. So I'll find one and I'll smoke it and it'll be awesome. But I'm not going to say like the crazy, thing that, we as Cowboys fans are like, stereotyped for saying, but what I will say is this is fun, this is interesting, this is cool, this is different, this is I like it. I mean, I like the spirit of where we are. That's really where I ultimately fall. So, all right. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on X, Instagram, Threads at RJ Ochoa, TikTok, RJ.Ochoa. Go like my Facebook page by searching for RJ Ochoa. Search for RJ Ochoa on Blue Sky. Follow me on LinkedIn if that's your thing. Email me, rj.ochoa@sbnation.com. Follow me right down below in the Bleacher Report app if that's how you're watching this live every Tuesday, every Thursday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you miss it live, how dare you? But if you do, you can catch the rewatch on demand right here in the Bleacher Report app or right here on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. Like the video, subscribe, tell a friend, tell everybody you've ever met, tell all your friends, tell people on the street. Just be like, subscribe, Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. I would appreciate that very much. So for now, I bid you all adieu. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, wonderful rest of your week. I cannot wait to see you next Tuesday and do it all again. Thanks for hanging out. Go Cowboys, and we'll see you next time.